I'm Batman.
I hardly think so. The real Cape Crusader calls his crime-fighting cohorts when he's running late.
I had to walk. I couldn't get Raj on the back of my scooter.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. Aquaman sucks.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Geekend. It is, of course, Friday, so we're going to be talking some geek stuff here on Tactics of the Geekend. And to help us do that, we have Chris and Justin with us, so really looking forward to that because the one that we're doing, and my shirt probably gave at least part of it away, we're going to be talking about the difference in Pokemon and Digimon. These are two of my all-time favorite franchises, have been since I was really, really young, and so I really like being able to compare and contrast things, especially when they happen to have some parallels and similarities. So welcome to the program, guys. Thanks for being on this episode with us.
A conflict of interest, judging by your shirt.
I think it will become apparent that I don't as the episode rolls on, but that's all that I'm going to say. So, yeah, Pokemon and Digimon. It's interesting to me because I'm actually doing this contrast episode, I won't say against my will, because I actually do want to do it, but I don't like giving credence to the idea that they should be compared. I know that sounds weird since I'm doing a comparison episode, but people compare them all the time, and I'm like, but they're very, very different. In fact, if you were to look at Pokemon and Digimon, there are actually other Mon series that are more similar to each franchise than Pokemon and Digimon are to each other. There's a lot of stark contrast.
So the Mons genre is very close to my heart, and you know that pretty well.
Right.
I mean, growing up for me, though, it wasn't just Pokemon and Digimon. It was Monster Rancher. It was Metabots. It was Flip the Time Detective, if you remember that one. You remember fighting Foodon? That one was pretty awesome.
Yes.
The list goes on and on. The Mons craze of the 90s just overwhelmed my childhood, and I enjoyed it so much. I think it really appealed to my interest in animals, you know?
Sure.
But yeah, so Digimon and Pokemon for me, I think the big difference in my mind is so the way the two franchises approach the actual Mons theme, I guess.
Formula?
Yeah, kind of like what? How do you convey the theme, right? So Pokemon were generally smaller,
Right.
They were
Until Dynamax.
Yeah, okay. This is real Pokemon back in the 90s.
Back in
With the
my
tallest,
day.
Onyx was the biggest Pokemon, okay? And he could still fit in a warehouse. Anyway, so the whole idea behind Pokemon was catch them all, right? Pokemon were collectible. There were a whole bunch of them out there. And so you had this broad diversity. You had all these different types. And so this really large diversity. You had an entire, catalog of different types of Pokemon based on all these different animals, concepts, things like that. Digimon, on the other hand, the Digimon they were less things to be collected, and they were more companions, right? We really didn't get the idea of a Pokemon being a companion except in the anime. And even then, it was really just Pikachu and Meowth, I guess. And they kind of added that over time, but Pokemon has always been high volume, shallow relationships.
Okay, yeah.
Like shallow relationships, but a deep. The words fail me tonight. Not a deep encyclopedia necessarily, but a deep
library.
Catalog option library, yeah, of choices. So Digimon, on the other hand, you had less diversity.
The Pokemon were more like tools.
More
than your own personal one and only.
Yeah, they filled different roles, right? Like you had your HM slaves, you had your different types to take down different gyms.
Yeah.
But Digimon came from the whole Tamagotchi craze, where it was a single companion for you. So I think for me, the biggest difference was In Pokemon, I'm going out, I'm going to catch a whole bunch of stuff, and I want to collect the entire set. Whereas Digimon, I have a single companion, and I'm going to maximize my relationship and my interaction with that companion. And I think the anime reflected that too.
Yeah, I think what you're saying 100% reflects their origin. Because Digimon originally is a Tamagotchi where you can't collect them all. In fact, you can't collect more than one. You have one monster that's yours, and then you just go through the story. I mean, not that there's a ton of storyline in the Tamagotchi version of Digimon, but there is some.
Was Digimon literally like preceded by Tamagotchi? Like
Digimon was the... So you think about how a lot of toys in the 90s had like a boy version and a girl version. Like, you remember how there were Polly Pockets and then Mad Max, or like Dragonflies and Sky Dancers, I think.
Yeah.
So Bandai Namco did that a lot, and they specifically did it with Digimon. They had Tamagotchi; it was wildly successful, but they noticed that boys weren't playing it very much, and so they came out with Digimon. So yeah, basically Digimon is the boy version of Tamagotchis.
Yeah, because by the time Digimon came, like, I played Pokemon as, you know, the red and blue version and the cards and everything before the anime was on my radar. But, like, the Digimon, I guess as a kid, I didn't notice that it was from Tamagotchi. I knew what Tamagotchi was. I had a little dog that I got in a KFC kids meal. And that thing lasted forever, man. Happy Meal toys were much better back then. But, I didn't when I became aware of Digimon, it was the anime, and I didn't realize that it was directly descendant from the Tamagotchi toys.
Yeah, it's really funny because as a kid, I thought they both started as anime. I thought both of them started anime, and what's funny is neither one did.
Yeah, I thought Digimon did. Honestly, I thought Digimon did until, like, how long have we been recording ago?
Well, and that's because those things weren't quite as popular in America, and so the anime is what really kicked off the Digimon series success in America. I mean, even the original Digimon, which a lot of people don't even know existed, the original Digimon, it looks like a weird, like, brick wall kind of thing with a lock on it. I don't know why. That's just the design. So
yeah, I remember that.
Right, those didn't get popular, though, until the anime came out, and what was the more popular version? The Digivice, because it looked like the thing that came from the anime. And so anime was sort of the segue into, whereas Pokemon, it kind of came over in the same order here as it did in Japan. It started with the games, then it moved to anime and the card game and all that stuff.
Except no green version.
No green version. That is sad.
The red version's got some Pokemon Blue doesn't have. Blue's got some that red doesn't have, and green doesn't have either of those groups.
And if you get the orange Digivice, you get Agumon, and that's it. So none of the others. But yeah, so I really do appreciate some of those differences that were brought up, and I think that it does have a lot to do with their origin. That Digimon, because that's how it started, that's the direction that they went with literally everything that followed it. And Pokemon the same way, they made it into something that, because I mean, what's the fun of a Pokemon game? You're building a team. You're not hanging out with one particular Pokemon. You're building a team, seeing how they work together, adjusting your team as they level up, as you get access to new Pokemon. And so it very much is an interchangeable sort of relationship that you have with your Pokemon. And it is one that's primarily of master and servant, whereas Tai and Agumon or Patamon and TK, they're best friends. And so there is a difference there.
Well, I mean, shoot, you even see repercussions to Tai trying to treat Agumon as the servant when he digivolves into Skullgreymon.
Right.
That actually had a negative consequence.
Yeah, and if you remember, the way that happened is he was really concerned about this new enemy, and he wanted to make him stronger, so he stuffed him full of food, which is encouraged in Pokemon. Yeah. I mean, with Poppins and
just shove a rare candy
curry,
at it.
Yeah. You will level up.
Although I never put my starter in the PC. I never got rid of the starter.
I don't think I got rid of the starter until... What would it have been? Maybe Black and White? Because up until then, I really liked all the starters.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you're not going to put your Charizard away. Come on.
No,
and
I
of course
mean,
it's a Charizard.
There's no reason to put your Charizard away.
Unless you have some sort of disorder and you got a Venusaur for some reason.
But, overall, what you're talking about, the fact that it's even called a starter Pokemon implies what? That it's not a companion.
That you'll move on from it, yeah.
Right. So, this thing is just sort of a gateway to move on to getting other Pokemon. And
Gateway.
in Digimon, that same sense really just isn't there. But I think really the biggest contrast between the two personally is scale. And I'm not talking about scale of the monsters themselves, even though there's a pretty big differential if you exclude Dynamax between that as well. The scale of the story and the way that the franchise handles it. Because I kind of divide the Mon genre into two different categories. The ones that take place with the existence of the real world, and then ones that take place with two worlds. So in some Mon series, you have an alternate world, like in Digimon, where this is the world where the monsters come from. And another one that was really, well, I don't know if it was really popular, but one that gained some fame and notoriety that was kind of like that was Moncoli Knights, if you remember that one. And there's
Vaguely.
there's other monster franchises that kind of play off that. Monster Rancher is like that. And so Digimon sort of borrows from that. And another thing that makes that different is the ones that tend to have two worlds, they tend to be on a much bigger scale because it's not just becoming a Pokemon master or gaining fame and notoriety and becoming really good at Pokemon. It's literally saving the world from destruction. And so that's really one of the big differences between the two of them is in Digimon, they're literally fighting for their lives. They're in real danger all the time. They're trying to, go up against and defeat whatever new foe or new threat has attacked the world this episode or this week or this story arc. In Pokemon, I mean, when you boil it all down, there's some times where they wind up doing things that are heroic and stop the bad guys, stop Team Rocket or whatever. But ultimately, like, the stakes just aren't nearly as high in Pokemon.
Well, in the video game, Team Rocket was like a legit crime syndicate.
Right, but even then, they're not threatening to, like, overtake the government or control the world or anything. I mean...
Well, kinda, if they had succeeded with Mewtwo.
Well, yeah, but... Yeah, later on, they do get a little bit more like that. But I'm saying, especially if you're looking at Red and Blue, you don't really see, like, hostile takeover kinds of things until...
Ruby and Sapphire.
Yeah, Ruby and Sapphire probably, with them trying to destroy the land or the ocean. But, even then, they're not trying to really conquer the world, but you are saving it from some kind of dire threat. And I think that really does make a pretty substantial difference, because instead of, just trying to become a really famous and powerful Pokemon trainer, you're actually trying to save the world, save your family. Like, the stakes are just much, much higher in that one as well. And I think that the series kind of reflects that, because Pokemon aren't as big or menacing. They're not like these giant world breaker kind of monsters like Omnimon or Alphamon or Apocalypmon, things like that. They tend to be powerful and sometimes kind of threatening, but they're not nearly to that scale most of the time. Notably,
Unless you take the Pokedex entries.
Right, where Arceus literally creates everything. Yeah, so I do think that that's a big difference. Now, what I want to ask, though, because this is really, really important to any franchise, especially to somebody that's so story-driven like me, which one has the better characters?
I'm gonna go with Digimon on that one. Especially, I think of Ken from season 2, and he was just a really interesting. He starts out as the antagonist, and then I forget exactly what it was that took him out, but he ends up joining the protagonist team. But he's got all this doubt that he's dealing with. He's like, I'm the one that caused all this pain and suffering and everything, and like, how can I do anything good? And like, it was a really good redemption arc. And then in season 3 too, there was the thing with the girl that had Leomon as her partner,
Cherry.
And all the spores and everything that were infecting people. And I remember at the end of that, it's like
the Dark Spore arc is actually in season 2.
oh, was it?
Yeah.
What, in like all the kids that were infected with dark spores, and they're like, how could we possibly live normal lives now? Like all this stuff that we've done, like that. I don't know. It's very romantic in the classical sense of the term romance, meaning very Christian-like. Basically, the spores represents past sins, and that how do you move forward kind of thing. I thought that was really, and that's what I was saying. I was thinking about the other day. I was like, I see an analogy here with old Digimon stuff I watched as a kid that I didn't catch on to as a kid, but now looking back, it's like, that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that you were talking about that this kind of alludes to is, as a general rule, Digimon's just significantly darker than Pokemon.
Yeah, I'd get depressed over it. I would get depressed for a couple days over something I watched on Digimon.
I totally agree with you, Justin.
Especially with Jerry. That broke my heart, man. Leomon died.
Leomon,
spoiler alert.
Leomon always dies because he's a lion. He's the Lion of Judah. You ever catch on to that symbolism?
No.
Yeah, he's the
wow.
He's the Jesus figure. That's why he always
Japanese people wrote this?
Yeah. I mean, I can't prove that that's 100% the reason that they did that, but I always suspected it did because Leomon always dies, and he always dies sacrificing himself for somebody else. Like, he's pretty clearly a Jesus art.
When coincidences start lining, I mean, lots of animes do have an interest in Christian themes. You see it a lot included in there. You'll see random crucifixes or priests or nuns or certain, sacrificial themes, which, their culture already has a strong, sense of honor in it. But I don't know. I wouldn't say that their culture inherently includes self-sacrifice as an honorable thing. But yeah, it is interesting when you see those themes in a show like that, because Japan's never been exactly a Christian nation. It's had past with Christianity, but also their emperors have often been quick to stamp it out. And coincidentally, one of the strongest Christian communities that was in Japan for many centuries was in Nagasaki. So,
well, when you don't have a First Amendment, that does tend to happen every now and then, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, what you're talking about, because it is, Digimon is significantly darker than Pokemon. It will integrate some of those deeper themes than Pokemon is used to. And I think part of that is just the nature of the beast, because Pokemon...
The nature of the Mon.
The nature of the Mon. Because Pokemon is just much more episodic. I mean, even in the games, the games don't have a continuous storyline. You are one character, and then in the next game, you're another character in a different region, and so on and so forth. And so Pokemon, by its very nature, is just very episodic, whereas Digimon, not 100%, because they did, from seasons 1 and 2 were not in any way connected to season 3 or 4, that kind of thing. So they did a little bit of that passing the torch and moving on, too, but you do focus much more tightly on the characters, and you develop them a little bit more, because in the Pokemon anime, it's basically, this is the feature Pokemon of this episode, and we're going to spend the entire episode focus on that. And then Ash goes to a new town. It's a completely different story. All the characters you met in the last episode don't matter anymore. And so, I mean, it's just the way that it kind of goes.
So when we say character, do we mean people or do we mean mons?
Both.
Oh, okay. So I think in general, it's difficult too, because when you think about the games versus the anime, so I think in general, Digimon did people better. I think the human characters in Digimon were done better. I think there was more depth. I mean, give me one example of character development for Ash Ketchum for the past 20 years.
He eventually became a league champion.
Didn't he get facial hair at some point?
No, he's still like 10.
Oh, okay. So
he was 10, then he was 11, then he was 12, and then about 6 years into the series, he went back to 10 and stayed there the rest of the time.
Gotcha. So character development is not Pokemon's strength.
No.
That's an understatement.
But I will die on the hill that Pokemon did Mons better than Digimon. And if I were in a court of law, my first example I would bring up is you look at Agumon, and then you look at a blue Agumon, and then there's a yellow Agumon, and then there's a green and a red Agumon, and they're all different Mons, but they're not. And so reskinning but using the same character model to me is not a different Mon.
To be fair, there is no green Agumon. You are incorrect, sir.
You see what I'm saying?
All the rest
You know
of them,
what I'm saying?
I know. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, but like,
is this beyond season 3?
Well, some of them don't actually appear in seasons, but there is Agumon.
like the card game.
Yeah, Agumon, Black Agumon, Snow Agumon, Toy Agumon, even though he's slightly different because he's made out of Legos.
He's more than one color.
Right. So there's a lot of variations. Although, to be fair, you have Pikachu, you have Plessib and Minub, you have the French one, whatever it is, Fatichu, that's what I call it. You have Pachirisu. So you're right.
So,
Digimon does it a lot more, but there is
it's a fair
little
point.
bit of that in Pokemon.
It is a fair point, but Digimon does it more, and Digimon has a smaller catalog, which means by percentage they do it a lot more.
That's fair.
And the other difference is, yes, and I agree, Pokemon has done Electric Rat like 5 too many times.
There's even an Electric Squirrel.
But we're not talking about Smash Brothers level of reskins either. We're actually talking about different models of creatures, not the same thing with a different color palette. So as far
even
as
got a Pokemon that wishes it was a Pikachu, the Mimichu.
Oh,
yeah,
we have
which I feel like at least at some point they have to be poking fun at themselves for that one. But
breaking the fourth wall a little bit there.
So I think across the board, I think Digimon did human characters and character development a whole lot better. But when it comes to actual diversity of creatures, originality of design, I think Pokemon wins. Now, I will say, as time has gone on, I think Pokemon has strayed from what initially gave it its charm. Because in my opinion, the character models have gotten way too complicated, way too big, and like needlessly complex. And I don't think that's Pokemon's strength, whereas Digimon can get away with that. And I think Digimon is better off. Right. And I think Digimon is better off having less creatures, less models that are more complex and more intricate and more artistic. And I think Pokemon's better off staying as the small critters genre.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying there. I was kind of leaning more towards character development as in personality and storytelling. And because of that, I would have to go with Digimon. Because
I agree.
I don't even think I have to rehash that point. You guys have pretty much already made it. The characters are just way deeper. I mean, Misty's entire motivation for the whole series is to get her bike back from Ash. I'm not kidding. That from the beginning to end, that's the only motivation she has as a character. And I actually like Misty. I think she's probably the best character in there. But even if you move past the anime, even if you're going into the catalog of games, which I think you have to do to fairly compare them, because let's be honest, Digimon has the better anime, Pokemon has the better games. I think that most people would agree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Digimon games are still fun, and the Pokemon anime still has its strong points too. But ultimately, I think that most people would agree with that characterization. So even if you're delving into the character development of the games, there's some really good characters in Pokemon. Professor Oak's an interesting person. Some of the gym leaders, especially when they got to like Black and White, some of the gym leaders got really interesting when they started just not being bosses that waited at the end of the gym, where they actually interacted with the world or would join you and help you, take on bad guys in double battles. They started actually developing personalities. So I don't want to suggest that Pokemon has nothing in this arena, but the Pokemon have almost no personality because, they're primarily animals. They're not really sentient beings. And, I'm not really using sentience in the right phrase there, but you know what I mean. They're not intelligent, like, talking creatures like Digimon are. And so it's no contest in that area. And then if you're talking about humans, Digimon did that better too. And so because of that, I think you have to argue that when you're looking at the overall the overall view of who did characters better, I think you got to give the edge to Digimon in this one particular category, because the characters are just so much better and more complex. And one thing that I really want to give Digimon applause on, and I promise I'll shut up after this, their character development is fantastic and actually grows with the audience. because you'll notice that Ty doesn't stay 10 years old for his entire life. He actually matures and moves on to junior high, and so do Sora and Matt. And the older they get, the more complicated their relationships become. All of a sudden, they start pairing off into couples, which you would expect of kids that go from being, 10 and 11 years old into junior high.
Oh, and become mentors to the new group,
right? And
as
so
well.
So they have a
Ty with
relationship
Davis.
them, too.
Well, it was Ty and Matt with Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Like that had me stoked as a kid watching that too. Like it's like, oh wow, he's got friendship and courage.
Yeah,
and like how Vmon could digivolve into two different things.
Yeah, having two crests was a really cool mechanic to add too. But all of those characters grow and develop, and I don't know. I know Chris has only seen 1 or 2 episodes of this, but Digimon Try, where they go up and go to high school, and then the new one that's coming out in a few months, I haven't seen that one yet, so I can't speak to it, but they're actually adults. So one thing I love about the series is it kind of grows up with its audience to a degree. And that was really awesome to see that as well. But there's so much more depth and range that their characters have. I don't think it's really any contest here that Digimon has the better characters overall. But
well, I think Chris was making a good segue into the next question.
I was actually just about
design.
to say that.
Yeah,
because
so,
a lot of the answer that you supplied speaks to that, and I think you convinced me of your opinion on that topic as you were answering the previous question. But yeah, I think just the sheer diversity of the Pokemon available at this time, and Digimon were more edgy and hardcore and grungy and grimy and stuff like that. Almost like they were
90s.
Almost like they were 90s. Kurt Cobain's nightmare.
Let's put 4 Z's in every word.
But just the sheer volume of the Pokemon that have been around, for instance, to begin with, like that they've more or less been able to continually come up with unique and interesting design ideas really speaks to the team, I think. Some of them are busts, but I think overall Pokemon's got the better Mon design. Even though, people might argue that they're a little bit more childish, but they're interesting. Like Bulbasaur, for instance, being a dinosaur with a plant on its back. That's interesting. And the play on the naming schemes, too. Bee, Drill, Charmander, Charcoal, Salamander. I get it. That's cool.
I actually would
Ekans,
argue...
snake spelled backwards.
I would actually argue that neither one has terribly clever names for their monsters. But
Nah.
I do understand. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do understand some people's frustrating with Mon being at the end of everything in Digimon. I can get how that's a little annoying. I get it. I don't necessarily think that's it's not something that bothers me, but I can see how it could bother some people.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of jumped on my rant a little early.
It's no big
But
deal.
I think I guess most of my answers in this discussion are going to be like not taking a side because I have a little bit of both. I think when you scale up in complexity, Digimon's designs are actually really good. Terriermon's Digivolution chain is awesome. I think that's just amazing. And I really loved, was it season 2 when they introduced the eggs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I thought those might have been my favorite of the series. I thought those were spectacular. So I think as you scale up in size and complexity, again, Digimon focusing on less volume, I think you get higher quality design. I think Pokemon's better at churning out a whole bunch of stuff, and you're going to get some chaff, but you're also going to get a whole lot of fun, interesting things. But if you want something that's 30 feet tall and has 6 arms, I would rather have Digimon artists interpret that.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Some of the Pokemon were like, I was under the impression as a kid after seeing the episode where Tentacruel attacks a city. It's like Tentacruel is huge, and then you see Tentacruel in another episode, and he's like, or you see his Pokedex entry, and it's like 4 feet tall. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so Pokemon had to come up with story reasons to make things back then as big as Digimon.
Yeah, fun fact about that. Do you know that they will not run that episode anymore?
Why is that?
Because they stopped running it in America because it aired like not long before 9/11.
Oh yeah.
With all the destruction and like the city being wasted in the Tentacruel episode, they decided to just not air it anymore. So that episode does not run in America anymore, even to this day.
That on VHS. I wonder if that's worth money now.
I have that
Yeah,
one
I
on
have it.
VHS too, actually.
Same.
But yeah, so one of the things that you kind of discussed, Chris, though, was scale. And that's one of the, I discussed that a little bit earlier, but here's another instance of scale being a really big deal between the two, because think about this. A Charmander is weaker than a Charizard, but it is still potentially possible, if the right conditions are met, that a Charmander might beat a Charizard. There is no way a Koromon is going to beat a Wargreymon. It's just not going to happen. And so their level of evolution is much greater by terms of degree.
Yeah, one is more linear and one's logarithmic.
Right.
Which I don't know if you get that reference or not,
I
but
do.
Okay.
Coronavirus taught me that. No, I get what you're saying, and it's accurate because, I mean, by the time that Digimon get to their mega forms, they're like, the level that they could destroy a city if they wanted to. And Pokemon just never really reached that level, even the more powerful ones. I mean, maybe your Mewtwo's or your Arceus could do one, but it still wouldn't be easy. Like, they wouldn't be like a Pokemon or Beelzemon or any of the other, like, gigantic, really tough boss Digimon.
Again, it depends on if you take the Pokedex entries into
Yeah, so Pokemon explains that, and in the anime it might be true, but it's never reflected in the games, because you would break the game if you did.
Well, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you had something that has the power of a nuclear warhead, it would be really difficult to believe that you could lose to a Bidoof. Anyway.
Have y'all ever seen that video where somebody animates like a Pokemon battle royale if the Pokemon were actually as powerful as their Pokedex entries say they are? It's got Entei, and like one of his entries says every time he barks, volcanoes erupt. He's just like, bark, goes, go over here, bark, bark, bark.
Yeah. So that's fair, I guess, to bring in that the Pokedex entries do exaggerate greatly upon that. But
or that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, what's canon?
Yeah, maybe the game's toned them down.
Maybe. But as far as overall design goes, I still just sort of gravitate more towards Digimon because I like the complex. I like, for example, that Omnimon, that he's the fusion of Wargreymon and Metal Garurumon, and he has aspects of both, and he's like this gigantic knight-looking thing. Or
I thought that one was a little bit. Is that where you get your screen name, Omnitamer?
Yeah.
Oh man, I always thought that design was a little bit lazy.
Oh, see, I loved it.
Honestly, what was the one with Vmon and Wormmon?
Oh, you're thinking of either Pyeldramon or Imperial Dramon.
Probably Imperial Dramon.
Yeah, because nobody liked Pyeldраmon's design. But Imperial Dramon's awesome.
Yeah, wasn't that the one that was like an airplane? Pyeldramon?
Basically, yeah.
They just loaded up on his back to travel around the world. Yeah, I thought that season 2 did fusions way better than season 1.
Well,
Imperial Dramon is cool. Huh?
There are none in season 1.
Well, there's
his statement's still
Omnimon.
correct.
Well, yeah, but he doesn't show up until like between season 1 and 2 in the movie.
Yeah, I knew he was from the movie. I didn't realize that was in between, but I was counting that as season 1. It's just like I said, that felt underdeveloped. It's just like, let's slap, oh, this one's got the head of one, this one's got the head of the other. But like Imperial Dramon, that actually looks like a fusion of the two. And what were the other ones called?
Sylphimon, Sylphimon and Shakuyamon.
Shakuyamon. Oh, that was the one that was like some sort of Buddhist or Hindu god.
Frankly, I hated Shakuyamon. I thought the other two were really good, but I couldn't stand Shakuyamon. But that's just me. But overall, I will say that I like the Digimon designs better. They're more complicated. I mean, you look at, for example, Beelzemon, super complex design, really, really cool looking, terrifying. Gallantmon is a really good one. Even some of the season 4 ones, which weren't as popular, like
Oh,
look at some of
Beelzemon, that one was cool. That was
Yeah.
the little imp dude.
and
That
he
was a
had,
little imp dude, and he rode the motorcycle.
and he had the Buster mode, like with that giant arm cannon and the wings.
Yeah, shoot. Going back to our conversation about heroes versus anti-heroes. There you go. There's your Digimon anti-hero.
Yeah, see, there are no anti-heroes in Pokemon because they didn't develop their character.
True
Digimon's design, especially for the Ultimates and Megas, kind of reminds me of like the Gundam animes.
A little
I don't know
bit,
about
yeah.
but it kind of has a Gundam feel.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. You're gonna have to throw up some images of this stuff for the people who watch on YouTube.
Well, one thing that you've got to keep in mind, though, is that because there is that difference in scale and evolution, because one of the ways that they kind of hint at this in, I want to say, episode 4 of season 1, where they meet Andromon, which is the first ultimate they've ever encountered, they say, well, it's like he's almost all machine. And you see that kind of developing along most evolution chains, not all. But like you were talking about Terriermon's evolution chain earlier. Think about it. He becomes more mechanical the more he grows. Same thing with Agumon, same thing with most Digimon. And so the reason that they become more complicated is because they are digital monsters and they become like more like androids the higher that they go. And that's not really something that Pokemon has anything analogous to.
Well, they are all ones and zeros to begin with, like packets of information.
Yeah, so that I think is part of the reason that their design really, really amps up when you get to the ultimate and mega levels. But overall, I would just say that I like Digimon's design better. There are certainly Pokemon that I think have a fantastic design, but you give me a choice of having a Charizard as a partner, even like a Charizard X, or a Wargreymon, I'm going to go with Wargreymon every single time. And that's probably basically all it boils down to be honest. Now, this is the big question, and it may take us a little while, and I'm even still kind of batting back and forth on it. Which franchise overall is better? Justin?
Pokemon. Gotta go with the sales, man. It's been a commercial success.
But you're not wrong
Continues to be a commercial success. Still sells games. I mean, I still buy Pokemon games. I haven't bought anything Digimon in years and years and years.
I still buy Digimon games, but I admit that the Pokemon games are better.
I don't think I've ever even played a Digimon game.
Digimon games are pretty fun. Digimon World, that was one of the most addictive games I've ever played. Like, I played the mess out of that one. Clocked in about 150-ish hours. So, just like building my team and making sure I had all the ones that I wanted. So, the Digimon games are really fun if you ever get a chance to give them a try. But some were better than others. See, that's another thing, too. One of the reasons that I say Pokemon has the better video games is because their games are always consistently good. Diamond and Pearl is my least favorite Pokemon game, but it's still a pretty good game. Digimon, there are some Digimon games that are fantastic, and some of them that are a steaming pile of crap. Like Digimon World 4 is awful. One of the worst games I've ever played. So I think that the consistency matters a lot when you're comparing the two, at least on that one particular category. But
So better franchise overall, I have to give it to Pokemon. And the reason is I think Digimon has the higher ceiling. I think Digimon has more potential, but we never really saw it. Digimon has consistently delivered over the years. They have stayed the course. They've strayed a little bit every now and then. You know, they've tried some things that I thought were stupid. They should have just stuck to the formula that worked. But Pokemon has been steady. It's been constant. And Digimon never really, I thought, delivered on a lot of the potential that I saw in it. That's not to say it wasn't good. Digimon's still a wonderful, in my opinion, a wonderful franchise with a ton of great stuff. But I think there was so much more potential that I never really saw come to fruition. And I don't know why. So I give it to Pokemon, but I think if we could go back in time, maybe like alternate reality, I think there's a world where Digimon takes over the industry if they did it right. And I just think they missed some opportunities. And that's why we see that Digimon can't keep a free app game running, whereas Pokemon is still selling new games.
Okay. I think that that's fair to a great degree. I think that I'm going to answer a little bit of that question. Digimon, one of its big problems with that consistency that you're talking about is because they don't have a centralized team behind them.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that I think Nintendo did right, because Game Freak and Pokemon Company and a couple of other very niche companies that, I mean, one's literally called the Pokemon Company. Pokemon is all they do. And then you've also got with Game Freak, name another Game Freak game. Name a non-Pokemon Game Freak game. You can't, because there's not one. So, like, the thing that I think really sets that apart is you have a group of people that are basically focused on one thing, and that is making Pokemon a fantastic franchise, and they're really, really good at it. Whereas Digimon, it's Namco Bandai, which has, the Tekken series, and Pac-Man, and Tales of Symphonia, and, they make toys, and all this other kinds of stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with Digimon, and so they can kind of, I think that there's some advantage to that in a way, that they can do something really fun with Digimon and then kind of ignore it for about, a decade and a half and then bring it back when it comes to its 20-year anniversary. So it's kind of cool that they can do that because they are able to do other things. But at the same time, I think that's the reason that it never really took off, at least in America, the same way that it did as Pokemon, just because there's not as much laser focus on making it a good franchise as the other. And I think that's the reason that, even though I think Digimon's a better premise as well, you don't really see that level of execution that you do with Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
well, also,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, also, I think Pokemon has the easier appeal to the less invested audience. Like, Pikachu makes a really good plushie to put in a claw game in an arcade.
True.
Like, Pokemon is easier to sell to someone who's just walking on the street. And I think Digimon's barrier to entry is higher too.
I mean, we saw what happened with Pokemon Go, right? I mean, people that had no interest in Pokemon or Nintendo or video games, period, were playing Pokemon Go. And that's never happened with Digimon. People that are knee deep in video game culture, like Justin, just haven't ever played a Digimon game. And so that mass appeal really isn't there. And I think that that's part of the reason, that's one of those barriers that you were talking about, one of those challenges that they've never really overcome. Now, if you're asking my opinion, I still think Digimon is a better franchise just because it just appeals to me for whatever reason. I mean, I'd hate to lose either one of them. I love both of these franchises. But if you gave me a choice, I have to live in a world without Pokemon or without Digimon, honestly, I'd probably give up Pokemon. And I know that probably surprises a lot of people, but as much as I love Pokemon, I'd probably take Digimon over it.
I want to pose a question.
Digimon shirt.
I don't. It's because it's hard to find a Digimon shirt because no one wants to buy them.
Because it's not the better franchise.
Shut up.
So, would Digimon exist in a world without Pokemon?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, they predate Pokemon.
But do you think it actually...
Would you have heard about it?
Yeah, would Digimon have gotten as much of a foothold in the West if Pokemon wasn't pushing that Mons craze?
That's difficult to say. I think that there's a good chance that it doesn't wind up in America. Well, maybe not a good chance. It's a coin flip. I'll say it that way. I think that's fair.
I mean, you could see Digimon could have faced the same fate as like Metabots or something and just never really made it out of Japan if it didn't have that. Even if Digimon predated Pokemon, I think Digimon still rode the coattails a little bit.
I think that that's fair. But
in the West,
keep in mind that Metabots also exist in a world where Pokemon exist, and it did wind up getting canceled after 2 seasons. So, Pokemon existing is not what propelled Digimon to the way, or allowed it to exist. Now,
yeah, but I think the difference is, so Digimon and Pokemon are both creatures, right? Mm-hmm. Dinosaurs, rats, whatever, you can relate to those things. The other ones that haven't done so well, Metabots, robots, Beyblade, Tops, I think they were much more dumb. Well, they were all much more niche. And I think Digimon and Pokemon both are a lot more relatable because they're simply just animals.
Well, yeah, but then how do you explain Moncoli Knights and Monster Rancher?
I think Monster Rancher did all right,
Not as good
but
as
it did
Digimon.
not as good as Digimon. It did. I think it petered out. I think Monster Rancher's issue was it didn't have the anime to keep up.
That might be part of it. I mean, let's be honest. Monster Rancher has a lot of potential. It never really took off the way some of the other franchises did.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that they definitely rode the coattails of Pokemon. I don't know that you could say that it wouldn't exist, but it might be more niche. Because here's the thing. I did this backwards, and a lot of people don't know this about me. I actually got into Digimon first, even though it sort of showed up. I mean, I don't remember. I'd have to look at the timeline. I'm not sure whether Digimon actually came to America before Pokemon or not, but it definitely was. The anime definitely didn't. The Pokemon anime came before Digimon, but I got into Digimon before I got into Pokemon. And that's backwards in the way most people did it. Maybe that's why I have a little bit of nostalgia armor for Digimon. I mean, I have it for Pokemon too, but maybe even more so for Digimon. I don't know. Maybe it's my personal bias, but I like it better. But clearly I'm outvoted because you guys liked Pokemon better, so.
I think anime-wise, hands down, Digimon is better. But considering the franchise as a whole, I give it to Pokemon.
Fair enough.
So, Caleb, now that we've finished this discussion, for the second half of our show, we're going to talk about the best Mons franchise, which is Monster Rancher.
And
so
we're
let's
out of
begin.
time, so let's go.
I know nothing about this franchise.
Monster Rancher is cool, not as good as either of the other two franchises we've talked about. But maybe we'll have to discuss that for another time. Thanks so much for being on the program, guys. I appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching the Geekend. We'll be back at the same time at 7 o'clock on Friday with the Geekend next week. Thanks for being with us. Stay the course, friends. Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media or our business partners. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Video production by Jackson Dean. Broadcast studio provided by Faulkner University. Location studio provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2020.